Hi, everyone. Mike Turner from HESC Priority Services. I'll be your guide today through the wonderful world of part-time TAP. So I did send a PDF copy of this PowerPoint presentation over to Patty Noren before we started today. So she said she would get that out on a listserv because I know already in the chat there's a question about getting a copy of the presentation. So yes, you will have that. In addition to the resources that Lisa mentioned before, the FAQs document, comparison chart, and other things we're trying to post up on our site. So let's get started with just a quick overview of what part-time TAP is. It's not a new program. Part-time TAP has actually been around for quite a number of years. What's new about it is a change in the budget that allows potentially more students to be able to participate in it because it had some prerequisites that were a little bit restrictive. But the program allows students who attend a CUNY, SUNY, or not-for-profit independent degree granting colleges in New York State to receive their full-time TAP award, but prorated for part-time study. So this would be students who are part-time students enrolled in anywhere between 6 to 11 credits. The minimum is 6 credits, so any part-time student who's enrolled for less than 6 credits would not be eligible for this part-time TAP program, although there are other programs that they could be considered for, like aid for part-time study. But this particular part-time TAP, they have to be 6 to 11 credits. And the same rule as with full-time TAP, courses must be applicable to their degree program as the general rules of TAP need to be met for part-time TAP recipients. So the big change, as I mentioned before, because this program's been around for many years, it's been a little bit underutilized. And so the state in the recent budget removed the prerequisite requirement that students had to have been previously a full-time student and have earned 24 more credits from 2 semesters of study in order to be qualified for to be a part-time TAP recipient. So what this does is it opens up the door for more potential recipients, including first-time students, right? Because a first-time college freshman who was part-time would have never ever been able to make this requirement if they are just a first-time attendee to your school and have never attended college before. So now first-time freshmen would even be eligible now for part-time TAP due to this removed restriction. The application process for part-time TAP, there is no special application process. So there's no new application that HESC is developing. It's the same full-time TAP application process that students go through now. Where the students will either be applying through the FAFSA pathway where they file their FAFSA and then they file their TAP application, or if they're DREAM Act eligible, they go through the DREAM Act pathway where they file the DREAM Act eligibility application and then they file for TAP through the DREAM Act. So the students would be screened for basically full-time TAP award eligibility, right? We're going to see if they meet the income requirements, including going through IVP. They have to also meet ability to benefit requirements, so the U.S. high school diploma or recognized equivalent, meet the residency and citizenship requirements for students who are traditional FAFSA to TAP applicants, or meet the New York State DREAM Act eligibility requirements if they're a New York State DREAM Act applicant, someone who's undocumented or DACA or is a non-resident of New York State who meets the DREAM Act eligibility requirement for the 2 or more years of high school. So those pathways still exist. The students are going to go through the regular TAP application process. So anyone who's coming to your school asking about or expressing interest in part-time TAP should just be directed to apply for TAP as you would tell any other student to apply for TAP. The one requirement that does remain in the program that has been around since the inception of part-time TAP is the first year requirement. So this was not removed in the budget. So in order for a student to be eligible to participate in the part-time TAP program, they have to be a first-time college student on or after the 06-07 academic year. Our system will disallow any attempt for a school to certify a student for part-time TAP who does not meet this first year requirement. So how do we know? Well, we know by looking at the first year a student received TAP. So we've already gotten this question to the Priority Services inbox, where school is asking why, when I tried to send a file over for a student to be certified for part-time TAP, were they then returned to us on the remittance advice as 5, not full-time and decertified. And it was because they attempted to certify a student for part-time TAP who was a first year 2001 TAP recipient. So our system knows that they cannot be eligible for part-time TAP because of the first year field of when they first received TAP. So keep that in mind when you're assessing the eligibility of students, that they still have to meet this first year requirement, just not that full-time prerequisite. They also have to meet a cumulative 2.0 average. So if you have continuing students who are looking to participate in part-time TAP, no matter where they are in terms of their previous TAP history, if they received a full-time TAP award or not, they have to have a 2.0 cumulative average. The only exception obviously would be a first-time college freshman, right, who has no prior enrollment history. So that student would be coming in fresh with no GPA on the books, even if they took college courses in high school or whatever. If they're a first-time college student with no prior college enrollment, then the student would obviously be eligible, but then moving forward, they have to maintain the 2.0 cumulative GPA. They must also meet the general good academic standing requirements that you already review for TAP, including assessing SAP and program pursuit, which we'll get into a little bit more in a moment. So when a part-time TAP student is qualified for part-time TAP, it's by college certification. So HESC does not have any sort of pre-knowledge of who's going to be eligible for part-time TAP or not, because the biggest thing that we don't know is what your students are enrolled for, right? So we've gotten this question from schools saying, well, can we provide students with an estimate of part-time TAP on the status list? We don't know if they're full-time or part-time. We don't know what credits they're registered for. So we're just going to still continue the process of awarding them a full-time award, showing that full-time award on the status list. But then when schools are reviewing on your end, through the certification process is when you would do the approval and conversion of their full-time TAP award to a part-time TAP award. And then when it comes back to you on a remittance advice, it would be then converted and then paid at the part-time TAP award amount, depending on how you certified them. All eligible part-time TAP students are certified the same way that you certify eligible full-time students, meaning that you're going to indicate that they're eligible. There's no special designation for eligible for part-time TAP. You're going to just say that they're eligible, but the way that we know that they're going to be eligible for part-time TAP is through the enrollment status field, where instead of reporting that they're full-time enrollment status, you're going to be reporting the number of credits that they're actually enrolled in. And that's how we know that they're eligible, but for a part-time TAP award. So we'll cover this a little bit more as we look at some certification screens. The tuition field also needs to be adjusted to reflect the student's actual part-time charges, because when we send them over to you on the rosters, remember, they're being awarded based on a full-time award. So the tuition that's going to be profiled for them on the roster is going to be your regular full-time tuition. So you will have to make those adjustments depending on the number of credits they're enrolled in that are eligible for part-time TAP and what the actual tuition charges are for those credits. So when it comes back to schools on the remittance advice, then there'll be a proration of the award amount and including a proration of points. So you can see here, and these charts will be provided to you. They're already on our website in the appendix area where we talk about part-time TAP certification, but it'll also be reiterated in our FAQs document. So you can see when a student is certified for a 6-credit part-time TAP award, you would expect to have a 50% amount of their full-time award being awarded to them when it comes back to you on the remittance advice. Also, the points would be prorated at the 50% level, right? So for a regular full-time payment, they would be charged 6 TAP points. If it's a 6-credit part-time TAP payment that they're receiving, then it's going to be 3 points that are used. And you could see how the proration flows from 6 through 11 credits. So this would be probably a helpful chart for you to have for quick reference. If you're trying to work with a student and say, oh, this is how much TAP we think you're going to get, you could look at these proration charts and they'd help you, kind of guess what amount they should have. We have a question about whether our part-time TAP and other part-time programs can be combined in the same term. So can students receive a part-time TAP award in conjunction with an APTS award, or even the part-time scholarship for those of you who are at the 2-year colleges where part-time scholarship is administered? And the answer to that question, and we did do the research and we checked with all the vetting on this, is the answer is yes. Students can receive a combination of the 3 awards, providing that the total of the combined award amounts are not exceeding their actual part-time charges, right? So these are all tuition-specific programs. So if a student's already 100% covered for tuition through their part-time TAP award, then they wouldn't have any room for an APTS award. The order is that if you're at a 2-year school, we award the part-time scholarship first, and then the other programs would follow suit. So if there's room in their tuition for part-time scholarship along with part-time TAP and then APTS, then we would award in that order. Points will be charged to the student for both part-time TAP and APTS. So students will be exhausting their TAP points if they're utilizing both programs, and could exhaust their eligibility a lot sooner if they're using up both programs. APTS is always charged the 3-point allocation, where you saw part-time TAP has a prorated allocation. So you could have instances where students are exhausting their TAP points a lot earlier at a 2-year school if they've been receiving multiple part-time TAP and APTS awards in the same term. So that's something that the student would need to take consideration of before deciding to apply for both programs. So let's talk about how do you evaluate good academic standing when you're looking at a part-time TAP recipient. It's the same evaluation. So we know that there's the 2.0 requirement in order for them to be considered for their award in the first place. But once they've been awarded, how are you looking at them down the road when you're trying to evaluate, well, are they in good academic standing for the next term? So we're still looking at program pursuit and we're still looking at SAP, but there's sort of a prorated measurement process that you're going to be looking at when you're trying to figure out, are they meeting these requirements? So let's start with program pursuit. So we know for program pursuit, we're looking at are students pursuing the minimum course load, pursuit meaning that are they starting a course and seeing it through to the end. So pursuit is not a measurement of whether a student passes or fails a class. It's a measurement of do they start and finish a class. So any grade that indicates a student failed to attend or withdrew from the class would obviously count against program pursuit. But an F grade on its face, if it's just for a failure to do good in the course, but the student was in the course from start to finish, that would meet the pursuit thresholds. Now, when we evaluate program pursuit for full-time recipients, right, we're always looking at the minimum full-time course load, which is 12 credits. For part-time TAP recipients, the threshold is based on the minimum part-time course load for part-time TAP recipients, which is 6 credits. So when I'm evaluating program pursuit for all of my part-time TAP recipients, the minimum threshold is did they meet their requirements for the 6 credit minimum part-time course load? And those same threshold percentages still count based on where they are in their payments. So a student who's receiving their first year, so first and second payments of either full-time or part-time TAP, they're going to be at the 50% threshold for pursuit. And then in the second year, it's 75. And then in the third year and beyond, they're at the 100% threshold. So if a student successfully pursues in the first year of receiving their, let's say, very first part-time TAP payment, they would be at the 50% threshold. So we would expect them to at least successfully pursue 3 credits, right? Because 6 credits is the minimum full-time course load. So let's try to flush this out with an example, right? So this is what I just mentioned. They must successfully complete the minimum part-time course load based on where they are in their payments received for part-time TAP. And it's important that you know that it's payments, it's not points. So when we're evaluating pursuit, we're looking at how many payments they've received in the past. We're not looking at how many points that they have, although points can help indicate to us how many payments that they've received. But remember, part-time TAP students are getting prorated points. So you might have a student who has 6 TAP points who got 2 payments of part-time TAP for 3 points each, and now they've received 2 payments of state aid, so they're at a higher threshold for pursuit. So that's important to keep in mind. It's not the number of points they have, it's the number of payments. Points are important when we talk about SAP when we get to SAP evaluation. So let's just look at a quick sample assessment so to kind of just bring this home of how you're evaluating pursuit. So let's say you have a student, you certified them for a 9-credit part-time TAP award for this fall semester. Based on their previous TAP history, let's say they were a full-time student for the last 3 years. They used up 36 points previously. Now they're at that 3rd, 4th year threshold of pursuit where they're supposed to pursue 100% of their minimum course load. When you look at the end of the fall semester, you look at the grades, how they did at the end of the term. You see that their 9-credit enrollment was based on 3 3-credit courses. And at the end of the term, they got 2 Cs, but they withdrew from 1 course. So now you're scratching your head saying, wait a minute, they withdrew from a course. Are they meeting their program pursuit requirement for a student who's at the 100% threshold? And the answer is actually yes, they're fine, because remember, the minimum part-time course load is 6 credits. So even though the student attempted 9 and received a 9-credit part-time TAP award, and they're in the 100% threshold, they're in that 3rd, 4th year receiving state aid, they are okay because they got 2 Cs, right? They pursued 6 credits, even though they withdrew from one of those classes and only pursued 6. 6 was what they had to pursue. So they're good to go. They meet the pursuit requirement. So just keep that in mind when you're evaluating. Satisfactory academic progress, same thing. We're looking at the same charts that we have. So there are not going to be any, we've already gotten this question a lot. Are they going to be new SAP charts? You know, there are not going to be any new SAP charts. It's the same charts that we currently have. So these are the SAP charts and same procedures that we teach you already for full-time TAP recipients, where you're looking at whether they're, you know, based on their first year, which chart that they are supposed to be placed on, and also based on the remedial status, which chart that they're placed on. So we still have our 2010 and thereafter non-remedial chart that most schools are using. And then we also have what I call the old chart, which are for your pre-2010 students and all your remedial students, including your EOP students. So these same charts are being used still to determine SAP for part-time TAP recipients. So how do you do that? Well, how do you place them if they're receiving odd point counts and they may not be receiving full payments to be able to climb the scale of the SAP chart? So the way we look at it is we do a round down, right? So if the students are receiving part-time TAP awards where their payments are prorated, then they may not have enough points to move along in the SAP evaluation, where you know, to get to the second evaluation, it's their 12th TAP point. The 3rd step of the SAP chart would be based on getting 18 points. So we're always rounding down if they have partial point counts where they haven't earned enough points yet to move to the next level of the SAP chart. So let's look at this to see how you would execute this. So you have a student who's been receiving part-time TAP at your school for maybe a number of years. And when you look at them right now, they have a really odd TAP point count, right? They're a first year 2015 TAP recipient, and they have currently a 33.5 TAP point count. I just chose this number arbitrarily just to give an odd number that would throw you off, like, okay, wait, 33.5, there's no spot for that on the SAP chart. What we're going to do is when we're evaluating the student, because there's no place for them, there is no position for 33.5 points, we're rounding down to 30 points, and they would be placed at the 5th position of the SAP chart, not the 6th position, because the 6th position requires that they have already 36 or more TAP points. So we're going to be evaluating them at that 5th position where they would have 30 or 30 or more points, but less than 36. And then we're going to see if they meet the SAP requirements in terms of credit progression and GPA for that 5th position. When they receive future part-time TAP payments, then they'll move along the chart, right? So usually, you know, students who are receiving 2 or more part-time TAP payments would then be able to then be advanced to the next positions of the chart now that they have more whole payment totals. So if they're meeting the requirements for the GPA and credit requirements for that position that they're placed on based on the round down that we just spoke about, then they're good to go for SAP, and they would be meeting the SAP requirement. So let's shift gears and get into the actual certification process for when you're ready to certify these students. What are you keying in and what are we looking for to have a successful certification process? So it's the same way where we're using HESCweb. We're going to go through the manual process because your system process is going to be different where how you're doing it in terms of, you know, banner and programming like that. We're not going to get into that. But if you were certifying on HESCweb, it's the same kind of process that should be reflected when you're sending files to us. So everything lives in the same area of the HESC website that you're used to now. You're going in secure transaction processing, you're going into grants and scholarships, and you're looking at student records. Students are not going to show as eligible for part-time TAP, right? So I just want to reiterate that, you know, we don't know that they're eligible for part-time TAP when they've applied for a full-time TAP award with us. So you're going to see them on here on View Student Record with a full-time award estimate. It's only after you've certified them and they've been placed on a remittance advice that you would then see in their View Student Record that there's been a conversion to a part-time award. So if you're going to do this manually, or you need to ever update a certification, well, that would live in the left menu in the View Submit Pending Certification area and the View Correct Student Certification area, where you're going to either work first-time certifications that need to be submitted, or you're making corrections to previously submitted certifications that may have not processed or may have errored. So you're going to be looking at your same list. Remember, these are going to be all full-time awards, so you'll be going in and you'll be making those adjustments. And the way that you complete the certification, you would review them to make sure you have them assessed properly, so you know how much they're receiving. This is the full-time award, remember. You would know how to evaluate SAP based on the number of points that they have. And you would also know, are they a candidate for part-time TAP, by also taking a look at that first year field, right? To make sure that we're not trying to give TAP, part-time TAP, to a student who has a first year prior to 06, 07. The certification codes that you would be submitting on these screens to us to result in a successful payment of a part-time TAP award would be the same eligibility codes that you use for full-time awards, right? So most of them are going to be coded 1 eligible, right? They're going to be eligible for a payment. It's in the enrollment status field that you would adjust, so we know that they're eligible for a part-time award. You would use also TAP no scholarship. There may be some instances where the student is eligible for part-time TAP, but not the scholarship that's attached to the same roster. And the easiest example that I can give of this are students who have TAP along with the scholarship for academic excellence. The scholarship for academic excellence requires full-time study. So a student may be eligible for part-time TAP, but they're also an SAE recipient, and you can use code 2 to say that we're going to give them part-time TAP, but they're not going to get their SAE because they're not full-time. You could also use the 3 withdrawn with tuition liability designation, and this would be a student who would have been eligible for part-time TAP, but has completely withdrawn from their part-time course load and has a tuition liability for the part-time enrollment. So the same thing that you would do for a full-time student who completely withdrew, it lets us know that they're not going to be in good academic standing, but they're still eligible to keep their award for that current term, and they're penalized in a future term for having withdrawn after receiving an award. So that process still remains the same even for your part-time TAP recipients. Your decertification code 5 should not be used to qualify a student. We've already seen this mistake already, and we've gotten a bunch of emails to priority services that a bunch of schools were certifying students thinking that they were eligible for part-time TAP using 5, not full-time. And then they were asking us, well, why did 20 students just get decertified? 5 is a decertification code. It's not a certification code. It doesn't result in a payment. It results in a disqualification. So please do not use 5, not full-time. If your intent is to qualify the student for a part-time TAP award, they should be certified as eligible. Now, not full-time can still be used in other instances, right, where you have a full-time student who's taking non-applicable coursework and they're not considered full-time to receive the full-time award. You could also use miscellaneous if you have a student who's part-time, but they don't meet the part-time TAP requirements, such as not being registered for enough credits, or the first year requirement, right? Their first year is 1999 and are not eligible for part-time TAP. So there's different ways that you could choose to decertify the students. So this is just to show the enrollment status field is what's key, right? So we're saying the student's eligible, but the way that we will know that they're eligible for a part-time TAP award is by having you key them in as eligible and using the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 credit designations. Please do not use the FT, PT, HT designations to certify a part-time TAP award. FT, obviously, you wouldn't want to use that. That's going to result in a full-time TAP award payment. HT and PT are used for accelerated study payments. So these are students who have previously received 2 full-time TAP payments in the prior 2 terms, and you would be evaluating for a 3rd consecutive TAP payment where the student may be part-time. Traditionally, you see this in summer, right, where they went fall full-time, spring full-time. Now they want to go part-time for summer because they've received 2 full-time payments in back-to-back terms. You're required to evaluate them under the accelerated study rules, not the part-time TAP rules. And then you would use the HTPT designation to indicate that they're eligible for a half-time, part-time accelerated study payment, not for a part-time TAP award. Now, if the student was previously enrolled in the prior 2 terms as a part-time student, then the accelerated study evaluation doesn't have to be made, right? If this was in fall of 21, they were part-time, spring of 22, they were part-time, and now summer they want to go part-time, that doesn't rise to the level of having to evaluate accelerated study because they're not receiving an accelerated payment where they're getting that third consecutive payment beyond the annual maximum, right? So that's why accelerated study is there. We've gotten this question about partial enrollment based on course applicability. And what do I mean by this? So the question is can a student who's full-time be certified for a part-time TAP award if they're taking some coursework in their full-time course load that's not applicable to their degree? And the answer is no. You cannot parse the enrollment of a full-time student to make them eligible for part-time TAP because you have a full-time student. So if you have a student who's registered for 15 credits and 9 of those credits are not eligible for their degree, and we're not talking about a final year of study student, I'm talking about just a garden variety full-time student, 9 credits are not applicable. So schools have asked us, oh, can we give them a 6-credit part-time TAP award? The answer is no, because they're a true full-time student and they're not eligible for part-time TAP. Conversely, if they are already a true part-time student, you may parse their enrollment. So if they are registered for 9 credits, but 3 of those credits are not applicable, then you can give that part-time student a 6-credit part-time TAP award based on a 6-credit applicable course load, and you would certify them for 6, not 9 credits. And you would also indicate the tuition for the applicable credits. So a 6-credit tuition profile, not a 9-credit, but you can't do that for a full-time student. Mm-hmm. Are students who take a full remedial course load eligible for part-time TAP? So this is similar to TAP. We actually have that requirement still that they have to be taking credit-bearing coursework. So they need at least 1 3-credit actual credit-bearing course along with their remedial part-time remedial course load in order to qualify them for a part-time TAP award. So again, using the example of 9-credit enrolled student, if they're taking 6 remedial credits and 3 actual college credits, they can get a 9-credit part-time TAP award. But if they're taking all 9 credits in these remedial credit equivalent classes, then they cannot get an award for that term because they don't have an actual college course for 3 credits or more. In the common questions that we've gotten so far, one of them is that we have schools who have tried to certify some students for part-time TAP, but they panic because they're not seeing the options for the credits in the drop-down fields, or they've been returned to you on the remittance advice as decertified as not eligible, not full-time, when you've tried to previously submit them in your files with the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 credit designations. The reason why some students are going to be restricted is something that I mentioned earlier. You need to make sure that the first year of the students are qualified to receive part-time TAP. So here in this example, I'm trying to certify part-time TAP for a student whose first year receiving TAP was 1999. They are not eligible for part-time TAP. Our system will not allow for that certification, which is why you're not seeing the options. The FTPTs are there because they could still receive an accelerated study award if this is an accelerated term. But if it's not, and they're not eligible for part-time TAP, then they're not eligible for an award for this term. Maybe they could look at APTS or if they're a 2-year school PTS. Again, a reminder about tuition. So the tuition fields do need to be adjusted based on the student's actual part-time enrollment and the applicable credits that are being certified for part-time TAPs. You want to make sure that you're doing those adjustments. And you still do have to screen for duplicative benefits, right? So if you have a veteran student who's receiving Chapter 33 benefits and that covers their part-time tuition in full, then just like for a full-time student, they wouldn't be eligible for a part-time TAP award because their tuition's already being covered in full by the money that they receive through the federal VA program. So you still need to do those checks. You want to make sure that you're still in compliance with that requirement. So just quickly, some next steps, and then we'll open up for some questions. The certification process runs just like it does for the full-time program, where we process certifications every week and we issue remittance advices every week. You want to make sure that you're going back and checking for your certification errors and making corrections. So as I mentioned, every week we provide the remittance advice. So you would expect that any students that you've certified in advance of Friday would be on your RA that Friday with their converted part-time TAP award. So you could check your RA to make sure you get the result that you're looking for. And you also want to make sure you jump into your errors queue, even if you are sending us batch files with, hundreds of certifications. Some of them may be erroring out, especially, like I said, students that you're trying to certify for part-time TAP where they're not a first-year eligible student based on their first year receiving TAP. You won't see that unless you check your errors. So, we will get a school asking us like, oh, we've been trying to certify the student for part-time TAP over and over again, and they're not getting it. And then they're in your errors for, it was misentered or they're not eligible based on first year. So please check your errors, especially if you send big batch files to us, to make sure that you capture that early, because we do ask you to check your errors during closeout. And if you're not checking them on a periodic basis, then you're going to have a lot of errors to comb through. So it's always just a good idea to periodically check your errors queue. So as Lisa mentioned, we will have some more additional resources. We do have some current resources that have been on the web. Like I said, part-time TAP has actually been around for quite some time. So we have Appendix M of the TAP manual that covers the procedures for certifying part-time TAP. We're updating that to make sure it's current. We're also going to have that FAQ document. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email us at Priority Services, and we'll work with you regarding any questions you need regarding part-time TAP or any other issues. Priority Services is the college's one-stop for all inquiries to HESC. So you're not required to make a call appointment with us. We actually prefer that you do not use up a spot that we would reserve for a student or parent to contact us regarding any issues, whether it be a question about part-time TAP, whether it be you locked yourself out, you forgot your password. You can email us at Priority Services. We'll direct you accordingly, or we'll help you right then and there. So please reach out to Priority Services. So that being said, I will stop the share and we'll go through some of the questions that have come up. I see there are a bunch in chat.
Yeah, Mike, I got the, yep, I'll take care of the questions.
I just wanted to jump in and I know this was a lot for everybody to take in. The recording will be made available to you. What I suggest also, we're going to answer these questions, is review the recording again, because you could always pause it, stop it, think about it, discuss it. Write out questions or scenarios that you come across that you have on, and then Lisa and Mike, would that be okay for them to send it to HESC,
yes.
Priority HESC? Is that a good idea?
Yes, and we have an FAQ that's pretty extensive that I've copied all the questions. A lot of them you haven't asked, so please take a look at the FAQ. Like I said, we're trying to get it out as quick as possible, because the question you might not have thought of today could be something that you need to know that we've already answered. So yes, but if you have any questions, of course, reach out to us, and we will address them and add them to our list of FAQs.